And I called him back and said, so you want me to be the most despicable Negro in the history of cinema?
Before Samuel L. Jackson became one of the biggest names in Hollywood, he almost lost everything. At 75, he's breaking his silence about a shocking incident that changed his life forever. It happened in his own kitchen, that forced his family to take desperate action. What they found, and what Jackson did next, is something no one could have expected. This is the story of how one of the greatest actors of our time almost didn't make it. Samuel L. Jackson was born on December 21, 1948, in Washington, D.C. But his early life was far from easy. His father, Roy, left the family shortly after Samuel was born. Roy lived a troubled life and died from alcoholism, meeting his son only twice. Samuel was raised by his mother, Elizabeth, who worked hard to support him as a factory worker and later as a supplies buyer for a mental institution. Alongside his mother, Samuel's maternal grandparents helped raise him in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a city deeply divided by segregation. Life in segregated Chattanooga came with many challenges, but it was also where Samuel discovered his love for music. In school, he played several instruments, including the French horn, trumpet, flute, and piccolo. This early exposure to music helped him develop a strong sense of voice control, something that would later become a key part of his acting career. As a child, Samuel struggled with a stutter. It frustrated him and made him feel self-conscious. His aunt, a performing arts teacher, stepped in to help. She introduced him to speech therapy and encouraged him to participate in plays, even as a young child. Over time, Samuel found his own way to cope, using the word motherfucker to push through his stuttering blocks. This unusual technique became part of his personality and stayed with him throughout his life. Even today, Samuel admits he still has NNN days when his stutter reappears, especially while reading. Samuel's life took a major turn when he attended Morehouse College in Atlanta. At first, he wanted to study marine biology, but after joining an acting group for extra credits, he discovered a new passion. Drama became his focus, but his time at Morehouse was about more than just acting. In 1969, Samuel became involved in a dramatic protest for racial equality. He and other students held several college board members hostage for 2 days, demanding more black trustees and better representation in the curriculum. Using chains meant to block students from the grass, they locked the trustees in a building. When Martin Luther King Sr., one of the hostages, fell ill during the protest, Samuel and the group lowered him out of a window with a ladder rather than unlock the doors. Later in life, Samuel learned more about his roots through DNA testing. He discovered he descended from the Benga people of Gabon, a connection that meant a lot to him. In 2019, he became a naturalized Gabonese citizen, deepening his ties to his African heritage. Samuel L. Jackson's move to New York in 1976 marked a turning point in his life. After years of performing politically charged theater with the Black Image Theater Company, he and his future wife, LaTanya Richardson, decided to take a leap of faith. They moved to Harlem with hopes of breaking into mainstream acting. It was a bold decision, leaving behind the stability of theater for the uncertain grind of New York's competitive arts scene. The odds were stacked against them, as many aspiring actors struggled to make it in a city that was known for breaking dreams as much as building them. Jackson's early days in New York were far from glamorous. He lived in a small apartment that cost $150 a month, sharing the space with none other than Danny DeVito, another future Hollywood star. The living conditions were humble, but Jackson had no choice but to make it work. Rent wasn't always easy to pay, and the dream of becoming a successful actor seemed a distant goal. To get by, he took on various odd jobs. One of these was as a security guard, a job that kept him afloat while he chased acting opportunities. He also worked as a stand-in for Bill Cosby on The Cosby Show for 3 years, a position that provided him with steady income and an up-close look at television production. This behind-the-scenes experience offered valuable insight, even though it wasn't the kind of role he dreamed of. During this time, Jackson developed an unusual daily routine. Mornings often found him in the less reputable parts of Times Square, drinking beer and watching kung fu movies to pass the time before heading to auditions, evening performances, or security shifts. It was a coping mechanism for the challenges he faced, but it also planted the seeds for future struggles with addiction. His time in New York was a mix of survival, learning, and enduring the frustrations of being a struggling artist. His first professional stage role came in 1980 with Mother Courage and Her Children at the Public Theater. Not long after, from 1981 to 1983, he played Private Lewis Henderson in A Soldier's Play off-Broadway. This performance became one of the most important stepping stones in his career, earning him recognition in the theater world. Around the same time, Jackson started to appear in small film roles. His parts were minor, often unnamed in movies like Ragtime, Coming to America, and Do the Right Thing. These roles were far from glamorous, with credits like Gang Member No. 2 and Hold Up Man. Yet, they were steps in building the foundation for his eventual rise. A key influence during these years was Morgan Freeman, whom Jackson met during the production of A Soldier's Play. Freeman was not only a mentor, but a source of inspiration. Jackson often compared his career progress to Freeman's, using it as a measure of hope when he felt stuck in roles that played into stereotypes. Freeman's groundbreaking performance in Street Smart, where he turned a stereotypical pimp character into a complex, riveting figure, taught Jackson a critical lesson. Freeman's ability to elevate even the most limiting roles showed Jackson the potential power of his craft. This lesson would prove crucial when Jackson landed his breakthrough role in Jungle Fever as the crack addict Gator. Like Freeman, Jackson transformed what could have been a one-dimensional character into an unforgettable performance. Samuel L. Jackson's addiction started when he was just 15. It began with casual drinking and marijuana, but quickly escalated after he moved to New York in the late 1970s. By then, drugs were everywhere in the theater world, and Jackson dove deeper into the culture. He started using LSD, then cocaine, and eventually developed a dangerous routine. Instead of buying small amounts of crack, he purchased powder cocaine in bulk to cook it himself. He thought this made him more sophisticated, but in reality, he was spiraling out of control. Theater life in the 1980s only fueled his addiction. It was common for actors to take drugs before going on stage, and Jackson was no exception. He and his castmates would get high on acid before performances, using it as a way to cope with the stress of struggling as actors. Drugs and alcohol became Jackson's way of dealing with the financial pressure and the ups and downs of his career. Even as his addiction grew, Jackson managed to keep a good reputation in theater. He always showed up on time, knew his lines, and delivered solid performances. But being high all the time dulled his potential. He landed roles in important productions, including Pulitzer Prize-winning plays, but he wasn't breaking through the way he hoped. His addiction was holding him back. One of his most painful moments came with the piano lesson. He had originally played the lead role of Boy Willie during its run at Yale, but when the play moved to Broadway, he was made the understudy. Watching someone else perform the role he felt was his ledge to success was unbearable. During performances, Jackson would sneak out to the theater's back steps and smoke crack to numb his frustration. It was a clear sign of how deeply addiction had taken over his life. The toll wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. At home, Jackson became a stranger to his wife, LaTanya, and their young daughter, Zoe. He spent most of his time in the basement of their brownstone, barely interacting with his family. Their home became known as the Villa in Hell because of the toxic atmosphere his addiction created. Jackson admits he was emotionally absent, focusing only on getting high and performing. His family, though physically close, felt completely disconnected from him. In 1991, Samuel L. Jackson hit rock bottom. After a day of heavy drinking at a bachelor party, he decided to level himself out with cocaine. He bought some from his dealer, went home, and started cooking it in his kitchen. But before he could take a hit, he passed out on the floor. The next morning, his wife LaTanya and their 8-year-old daughter Zoe found him unconscious. The drugs were still cooking on the table, and the room was littered with drug paraphernalia. For Zoe, seeing her father like this was heartbreaking. For LaTanya, it was the last straw. Their home had become a toxic place. Jackson's addiction had taken over, and the family was at a breaking point. LaTanya knew something had to change. She called Jackson's best friend, who was a drug counselor, and they quickly found him a spot at a rehab center in upstate New York. She gave Jackson a simple choice: get help or lose his family. The ultimatum shocked him. He had been ignoring the problem for years, but now he couldn't deny it anymore. He knew he had to act. The very next day, Jackson entered the Hazelden Foundation in Minnesota for a 28-day treatment program. Rehab wasn't easy, but it opened his eyes. Through therapy, he learned about the root causes of addiction and faced his need for excess. He also began to understand how these lessons could help him as an actor. He realized that to create believable characters, he needed to understand their struggles and how they overcame them. Rehab didn't just make him sober. It gave him a new perspective on life and his career. Against all odds, Jackson stayed sober after just one attempt at rehabilitation. He left the program with a clear mind and a fresh start. The moment on the kitchen floor had been his lowest point, but it became the turning point that set him on the path to becoming one of the most iconic actors of his generation. Just 2 weeks after finishing a 28-day rehab program, Samuel L. Jackson took on a role that would change his life forever. He played Gator Purify, a crack addict, in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever, 1991. His counselors warned him that playing a drug user so soon after rehab could be risky, but Jackson refused to back down. He felt ready and believed the role would let him turn his struggles into something meaningful. Jackson threw himself into the character. On the first day of filming, he was so convincing that security guards mistook him for a real crack addict. They tried to chase him away from the craft services table, not realizing he was part of the cast. His performance came from a deeply personal place. He had lived through addiction and knew how drugs could destroy lives and tear families apart. That raw experience gave his portrayal an authenticity that audiences couldn't ignore. The film was a success, earning $43.9 million at the box office on a $14 million budget. But it was Jackson's performance that stood out the most. At the 1991 Cannes Film Festival, his work was so powerful that the jury created a special Best Supporting Actor award just for him. This was a first in Cannes' history. Spike Lee accepted the award on Jackson's behalf, as Jackson was already working on his next movie. Jackson's work with Spike Lee had started years earlier when Lee was still in film school. They worked together on several projects, including Do the Right Thing and Mo Better Blues. Their partnership wasn't without conflict. In 1992, they had a falling out over salary negotiations for Malcolm X. But Jungle Fever cemented Jackson's place as a serious actor with immense talent. For Jackson, playing Gator was more than just acting. It was a way to confront his own past and move forward. The role felt like a turning point, almost as if he was killing off the person he used to be. Staying sober wasn't easy, but Jackson used what he learned in recovery to focus on his craft. His hard work paid off. His breakthrough came in 1994 with his unforgettable role as Jules Winfield in Pulp Fiction. The philosophical hitman, known for delivering the iconic Ezekiel 25:17 speech, cemented Jackson's status as a force to be reckoned with. This role was especially significant as it came shortly after Jackson's personal journey of rehabilitation, adding depth to his portrayal. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. though he unexpectedly lost to Martin Landau for Ed Wood. Despite this, Pulp Fiction catapulted Jackson into stardom and remains one of his most defining roles. Jackson's association with the Marvel Cinematic Universe added another layer to his legendary career. His journey as Nick Fury began in a unique way. Marvel Comics had already redesigned the character to look like him before he was officially cast. When the role was offered, Jackson agreed to an unprecedented 9-picture deal. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly these films would be made, humorously noting that he completed the contract in just a few years. His portrayal of Nick Fury spanned 12 Marvel projects, making him one of the franchise's most enduring and recognizable figures. Even after completing his contract, Jackson expressed his passion for the character, joking that he could play Fury well into his 80s, likening himself to the Alec Guinness of Marvel movies. Jackson's filmography has also earned him a staggering achievement. He is the highest-grossing actor of all time. With 45 films each earning over $100 million at the global box office, his movies have collectively grossed more than $14.6 billion worldwide. Among these, Avengers: Endgame stands out as his highest-grossing film, with a record-breaking $2.794 billion in global earnings. This consistent success highlights Jackson's versatility and enduring appeal across generations. At 75, Jackson continues to defy expectations, both in his career and in his personal life. A serious health scare involving a life-threatening blood clot near his heart led him to make significant lifestyle changes. He adopted a vegan diet, which drastically improved his health. Initially, his dramatic weight loss led people to believe he was unwell, but the results proved otherwise. The diet lowered his blood pressure, reduced his cholesterol, and improved his overall body mass index. Jackson attributes this change to his ability to stay active and energized, even as he continues his demanding film schedule. What makes Jackson's story even more remarkable is that his first major role after getting sober was as a crack addict in Jungle Fever. This performance was so powerful that the Cannes Film Festival created a special Supporting Actor Award just for him. For someone newly sober, this role could have been a risky choice. Instead, it became a cathartic moment that launched his career to new heights. It was the beginning of a journey that would see him become one of the most respected and prolific actors in the industry. Jackson's impact goes beyond his success at the box office. He has become a mentor to younger actors, especially those dealing with addiction. By sharing his story openly, he has helped reduce the stigma around addiction in Hollywood. At 75 years old, he remains active and continues to advocate for sobriety and mental health. His work ethic is legendary. He has appeared in over 150 films since getting sober, averaging nearly 5 movies a year. This incredible productivity shows younger actors that sobriety isn't a limitation. It can be a pathway to even greater creativity and success. Even in his mid-70s, Jackson shows no signs of slowing down. He is in talks to star in J.J. Abrams' new $200 million Warner Brothers project, alongside Glenn Powell and Jenna Ortega, with filming set to begin in 2025. His upcoming projects include The Piano Lesson, Afterburn, and The Unholy Trinity. These films span a range of genres, from period dramas to sci-fi thrillers, highlighting his versatility and passion for storytelling. One of Jackson's personal ambitions remains unfulfilled. He hopes to bring his character Nick Fury to Wakanda in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After 16 years in the role, he is still excited about finding new ways to expand his characters and their stories. His continued enthusiasm for his craft, even after decades of success, is a reminder of how far he has come and how much he still has to offer.